What if I told you that the most powerful statement you could ever make requires no words at all? What if the truest expression of who you are has nothing to do with what you say and everything to do with how you live? Picture this. You're at a gathering and someone questions your life choices. Maybe it's your career path, your relationship status, your appearance, or a decision you've made. You feel that familiar tightening in your chest, that instinct to defend, to explain, to justify. Words start forming in your mind, ready to pour out in a carefully constructed defense of your choices. But what if, in that moment, you simply smiled and said nothing? What if you let your life do the talking? We live in a world obsessed with explanation. We've become a society of constant commentary, where everyone feels entitled to an opinion about everyone else's life, and where we feel obligated to respond to every judgment, every criticism, every raised eyebrow. We spend countless hours crafting responses to critics who will never understand us, writing paragraphs to people who have already made up their minds, defending our choices to those whose opinions ultimately have no bearing on our happiness. But here's a truth that might set you free. You don't owe anyone an explanation for living your authentic life. The concept of letting your life speak is about recognizing that true strength doesn't come from articulating your worth. It comes from embodying it. It's about understanding that the most confident people you know aren't the ones who talk the most about their values. They're the ones who live them so completely that words become unnecessary. Think about the people who have truly inspired you. Was it their explanations that moved you, or was it their actions? Was it their justifications for their choices, or was it the quiet dignity with which they lived their truth, regardless of opposition? The real power in your life doesn't come from your ability to defend yourself. It comes from your willingness to live so authentically, so aligned with your deepest values, that your very existence becomes your statement. Your life becomes your argument. Your choices become your explanation. Let's be clear about something from the start. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not avoidance. Silence is not surrendering your voice or your truth. The silence we're talking about is strategic, intentional, and deeply powerful. It's the silence that comes from knowing who you are so completely that you don't need external validation to confirm it. It's the silence that recognizes not every battle deserves your energy, not every critic deserves your attention, and not every judgment requires a response. When we constantly defend ourselves, we're operating from a place of insecurity. We're essentially saying, please validate my choices. Please tell me I'm okay. Please approve of my life. We're handing over our power to others, giving them the authority to determine our worth through their understanding or misunderstanding of our choices. But here's what happens when you stop defending yourself. You stop bleeding energy into bottomless pits. You stop wasting your precious time and emotional resources on people who are never going to understand you anyway. You reclaim the energy you've been giving away and redirect it toward actually living the life you've been so busy explaining. Think about how much mental space you've given to imaginary arguments. How many hours have you spent mentally rehearsing what you'd say to someone who criticized you? How many times have you replayed conversations, thinking of better responses, sharper comebacks, more convincing explanations? All of that is energy you could have invested in actually building the life you want. Silence in the face of criticism isn't about being passive, it's about being selective. It's about recognizing that your energy is finite and precious, and not everyone deserves access to it. It's about understanding that some people are so committed to misunderstanding you that no amount of explanation will change their minds. They're not looking for understanding, they're looking for ammunition. When you choose silence, you're not giving up your voice. You're choosing when and where to use it. You're exercising the ultimate form of self-respect, the belief that your choices don't require a jury's approval. Integrity is the art of making your actions and your values indistinguishable from each other. It's living in such complete alignment with what you believe that who you are and what you do become the same thing. When you live with integrity, something remarkable happens. You stop needing to explain yourself because your life becomes self-explanatory. People can see your values in action. They can witness your priorities through your choices. They can understand your character through your consistency. Consider the person who constantly talks about loyalty but abandons friends in difficult times. Compare them to the person who never mentions loyalty but shows up year after year in the moments that matter. Which one truly embodies loyalty? Which one needs to explain what loyalty means to them? Living with integrity means that your life becomes a coherent narrative. There's no disconnect between what you claim to value and what you actually prioritize. You don't need to tell people you're committed to health. They can see it in how you treat your body. You don't need to announce that family matters to you. It's evident in how you spend your time. You don't need to declare your work ethic. It's visible in what you produce. This alignment creates a quiet authority that no amount of words can manufacture. When someone questions your dedication, your track record answers for you. When someone doubts your capabilities, your results speak louder than any defense. When someone challenges your character, your consistency over time tells the whole story. But living with integrity requires something difficult: honesty with yourself. You can't let your life speak if you're living someone else's script. You can't let your actions communicate your truth if your actions are designed to please others or conform to expectations that don't resonate with who you actually are. This is why letting your life speak is so powerful. It forces authenticity. You can fake words. You can craft explanations that sound good, but you can't fake a life. Your life, over time, reveals the truth of who you are and what you genuinely value. And when those things align with your deepest self, when you're living your truth rather than performing someone else's expectations, that's when your life speaks with undeniable clarity. Let's talk about what it costs you to constantly justify yourself, because there is a cost, and it's higher than most people realize. Every time you explain yourself to someone who doesn't genuinely want to understand, you chip away at your self-confidence. You're essentially telling yourself that your choices need external validation to be legitimate. You're training yourself to look outward for approval rather than inward for alignment. Think about how it feels in your body when you're defending yourself. Notice the tension, the anxiety, the desperate need to be understood. That physical response is your body telling you something important. This interaction is costing you something vital. Constant justification creates an exhausting cycle. You explain yourself, which invites more questions and criticisms, which requires more explanation, which invites more judgment. It's an endless loop that drains your energy and ultimately goes nowhere. Because here's the truth: people who need you to justify your life to them will never be satisfied with your explanations. There will always be another question, another doubt, another criticism. Meanwhile, people who genuinely respect you don't need lengthy explanations. They trust that you have reasons for your choices. They believe in your capability to direct your own life. They might ask questions out of genuine curiosity, but they don't demand justifications as proof of your right to exist as you are. The exhaustion of constant justification also damages your decision-making. When you're always preparing to defend your choices to others, you start making choices based on how defensible they are, rather than how aligned they are with your truth. You choose the path you can most easily explain, rather than the path that genuinely calls to you. You prioritize what will make sense to others over what makes sense to your soul. Contrast this with the freedom of living authentically, without the need for constant explanation. Imagine making decisions based solely on whether they align with your values and your vision for your life. Imagine the peace of knowing that your life is yours to live, not yours to justify. Imagine the energy you'd have available for actually building the life you want if you weren't spending it all defending the one you have. This freedom doesn't mean you never explain yourself. It means you choose when explanation serves a purpose, when it deepens connection, clarifies intention, or facilitates collaboration. But it's a choice, not an obligation. It comes from a place of sharing, not a place of desperate validation seeking. Let's look at people who have embodied this philosophy, whose lives have spoken so loudly that their words became almost unnecessary. Consider Maya Angelou. Yes, she was a poet and author who used words professionally, but what made her words powerful was that they were backed by a life of extraordinary courage and resilience. She didn't need to convince people she was strong. Her survival and her thriving despite unimaginable circumstances spoke for her. She didn't defend her worthiness. She embodied it so completely that it became undeniable. Think about someone like Keanu Reeves. In an industry known for ego and self-promotion, he's become legendary not for what he says about himself, but for how he lives. Stories circulate constantly about his kindness, his humility, his generosity, not because he's publicizing these acts, but because people who encounter him can't help but share. His life speaks so clearly about his character that he rarely needs to say anything about it himself. Or consider Malala Yousafzai. She didn't defeat the Taliban with explanations or justifications. She defeated them by continuing to pursue education, by continuing to speak for girls' rights, by continuing to live her values even after they literally tried to kill her for them. Her life, her willingness to risk everything for what she believed, spoke more powerfully than any argument could. But this philosophy isn't only for the famous. Think about people in your own life who embody it. Maybe it's the single parent who works multiple jobs and never complains, never seeks sympathy, just shows up day after day, doing what needs to be done. Their love for their children speaks through every sacrifice, every tired morning, every bill paid. Maybe it's the colleague who never talks about their work ethic but consistently delivers excellence. They don't defend their methods or justify their processes. They just produce results that speak for themselves. Maybe it's the friend who never posts about their charitable work or volunteers for recognition, but you discover they've been quietly helping people for years. Their compassion speaks through their actions, not their announcements. Or perhaps it's the person who left a prestigious career to pursue their passion, who faced judgment and skepticism but never tried to convince anyone their choice was right. Years later, watching them thrive in their authentic path, their joy and fulfillment speak louder than any defense they could have offered. These are people who understand that the best response to doubt is demonstration. The best answer to criticism is a life well lived. The best defense of your choices is the fruits they bear over time. So if living authentically without constant justification is so freeing, why do so many of us struggle with it? Why do we feel this compulsive need to explain ourselves to people whose opinions shouldn't matter to us? The roots run deep, often back to childhood. Many of us grew up in environments where we had to justify our needs, explain our feelings, or defend our desires just to have them acknowledged. We learned that our voice, our choices, and our preferences were only valid if we could build a strong enough case for them. We internalized the message that we needed permission to be ourselves. This creates a pattern that follows us into adulthood. We become adults who still feel like we need approval for our choices. We operate as though there's some cosmic authority that needs to sign off on our decisions before we're allowed to make them. Fear of judgment is another powerful driver. We're social creatures, and there's a real primal fear of rejection. When someone criticizes our choices, that ancient part of our brain sounds an alarm. They might exclude us from the tribe. We need to fix this. We need to make them understand so they'll accept us again. But here's what we're not acknowledging in those moments. Not everyone's acceptance is necessary for our survival or our happiness. In fact, some people's acceptance would require us to betray ourselves, to shrink, to become less than we are. Why would we want that? There's also the trap of believing that if we just explain ourselves well enough, everyone will understand and approve. This is a comforting fiction, but it's still a fiction. Some people are fundamentally unable or unwilling to understand choices that differ from their own. Some people need you to be wrong so they can feel right. No amount of explanation will bridge that gap. Social media has amplified this problem exponentially. We're now constantly exposed to others' opinions about how we should live. Everyone has become a critic, a judge, a commentator on everyone else's life. The pressure to justify ourselves has intensified because the audience has expanded. We're not just explaining ourselves to people we know. We're performing our lives for an invisible audience of potential critics. But here's the question we need to ask ourselves. Why do we feel the need to explain ourselves to people who have no real stake in our lives? What are we truly trying to prove, and to whom? Often we're not trying to convince others, we're trying to convince ourselves. We're seeking external validation because we're not fully convinced of our own choices. We're looking for someone else to tell us we're okay, our decisions are right, our path is valid, This is the deeper issue. The compulsion to justify ourselves externally often indicates a lack of internal certainty. When you truly know something is right for you, when you're deeply aligned with your choice, other people's opinions become background noise. Interesting, perhaps, but not determinative. So how do we break this pattern? How do we move from constantly defending ourselves to confidently living ourselves? First, get clear on your values. Really clear. Not the values you think you should have, not the values that would impress others, but the values that genuinely matter to you. Write them down, prioritize them, use them as your compass. When you make decisions aligned with your actual values, you won't need to justify them to others because you'll be justified to yourself. Second, practice the pause. When someone criticizes your choices or demands an explanation, resist the urge to immediately defend yourself. Pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, does this person genuinely want to understand, or are they looking to judge? Will my explanation serve a purpose, or am I just seeking their approval? If someone genuinely wants to understand you, a simple, clear statement is often enough. You don't need lengthy justifications. This choice aligns with my values, or this feels right for where I am in my life, can be sufficient. If it's not sufficient for them, that's information about them, not a signal that you need to explain more. Third, set boundaries. Not every question deserves an answer. Not every criticism deserves a response. You're allowed to say, I appreciate your concern, but I'm comfortable with my decision, and then change the subject. You're allowed to simply smile and redirect the conversation. You're allowed to recognize that someone's desire to understand doesn't obligate you to explain. Fourth, trust yourself. This is perhaps the most important step. When you trust your own judgment, when you believe in your own capacity to direct your life, other people's doubts become less threatening. You don't need to convince them because you've already convinced the person whose opinion matters most, yourself. Practice making small decisions without seeking input or validation. Notice how it feels. Build your confidence in your own judgment. Start with low-stakes choices and work your way up. Over time, you'll develop a stronger sense of internal authority. Fifth, embrace silence as a powerful tool. Silence doesn't mean you have nothing to say. Sometimes it means you have everything to say, but you're choosing to say it through your actions instead. Silence can be dignity. Silence can be self-respect. Silence can be the ultimate expression of confidence. When someone tries to provoke you into defending yourself, sometimes the most powerful response is none at all. Let them have their opinion. Let them think what they want. Meanwhile, you continue living your truth. Time and your consistent actions will tell the story better than any words could. Sixth, cultivate internal validation. Learn to acknowledge yourself. Celebrate your own growth. Recognize your own progress. When you become your own source of validation, you stop being dependent on others for it. This doesn't mean you become indifferent to all feedback. Healthy relationships involve mutual understanding and sometimes productive challenge. But you stop needing approval for your basic right to exist as you are. Finally, remember that letting your life speak is a practice, not a destination. You'll have moments where you slip back into old patterns of over-explaining. That's okay. Notice it, learn from it, and return to your practice. Over time, it becomes more natural. The urge to justify yourself weakens. The confidence in your own path strengthens. We've covered a lot of ground, but it all comes back to one central truth. You are free. You are free to live your life according to your own values, your own vision, your own sense of what's right for you. And you are free from the obligation to make everyone understand or approve of that life. True strength isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself, defend itself, or justify itself. True strength is quiet and certain. It shows up. It does the work. It lives the values. It walks the path, regardless of who's watching or what they're saying. When you let your life speak for you, something remarkable happens. You reclaim all the energy you've been pouring into explanations and justifications. You redirect it toward actually living, toward growing, creating, connecting, experiencing. You stop performing your life for an audience and start living it for yourself. You also inspire others in ways that words never could. When people see someone living authentically, confidently, making choices aligned with their values without seeking approval, it gives them permission to do the same. Your quiet confidence becomes an invitation for others to find their own. This doesn't mean you become isolated or stop communicating. It means your communication becomes more intentional, more genuine. You speak when you have something meaningful to say, not when you're desperately seeking validation. You share your truth when it serves connection, not when you're trying to convince someone of your worthiness. Think about one area of your life right now where you feel the urge to explain yourself to others. Maybe it's a career choice, a relationship decision, a lifestyle change, or a personal boundary you've set. How much energy are you currently spending on justifying this choice to people who may never understand it? What would it feel like to redirect that energy into simply living that choice more fully? What if instead of crafting the perfect explanation for why you're living this way, you just lived it? What if you trusted that your life, over time, would demonstrate the wisdom of your choice more effectively than any argument could? Here's your invitation. For the next week, pay attention to when you feel the urge to justify yourself. Notice the physical sensation, the anxiety, the desperation for understanding, and then experiment with letting it go. Choose silence. Choose a simple, clear statement without elaborate justification. Choose to trust that your life will speak for you. You might be surprised at what happens. You might find that most people move on much more quickly than you expected. You might discover that the people who genuinely care about you didn't need the long explanation anyway, and you might notice how much lighter you feel, how much more energy you have when you're not constantly defending your right to exist as you are. Remember, your life is your message. Your choices are your statement. Your actions are your argument. Everything else is just noise. When you let your life speak for you, you don't just empower yourself, you free everyone else from the burden of your explanations. You release them from the obligation to understand or approve. You simply offer them the gift of your authentic presence and allow them to take from it what they will. In the end, the people who are meant to understand you will understand you through your actions. The people who aren't meant to walk your path with you won't understand no matter how eloquently you explain. And that's okay. That's how it should be. So be silent. Let your life speak. Live so authentically, so aligned, so true to your deepest values that your very existence becomes your most powerful statement. Trust that a life well lived is the only defense you'll ever need. Your life is speaking right now. The only question is, what is it saying?